things that we were able to accomplish is real. Remember earlier last week, the Assembly Republicans all signed on to a letter right after inauguration talking about the fact that we know there are lots of issues that we can find common ground on. One of the ones that's the most important to Assembly Republicans, and it has been really for as far as I can remember, and that has been trying to reduce the tax burden on Wisconsin families. So at the joint caucus meeting with Governor Evers, we really tried to sit back afterward and say, okay, where are there areas that we can continue to start our agreement? Instead of picking fights, we wanted to pick issues where we can find common ground. Go back to the campaign and think about the issues that we saw with the millions of dollars in commercials. They really focused on two different areas. Number one, of course, protecting people with pre-existing conditions. I am very proud that our caucus is again leading the way. We had a good hearing last week. We had a committee vote that will be moving itself forward to be able to get the bill to the floor on Tuesday, which will protect every single person that we are able to protect with pre-existing conditions. That is something that is a nonpartisan issue. Every single person that I know believes that that is settled law, and we want to make sure that everyone in Wisconsin has that guarantee so they don't have to worry about a condition for a loved one or for themselves. So you think about those TV commercials again, and the second issue that I saw on my TV all across the fall was we're going to do something about reducing taxes on middle-class families and do it in a way that has a sizable impact. Now, as Assembly Republicans have crafted our package over the course of the last 8 years, we have always done kind of a broad-based, across-the-board tax cut. That has been our preference. But we also know we live in divided government, and we have to find ways to get that common ground between the two parties. So we are taking the surplus that was developed over the course of the past 8 years under Republicans, a sizable surplus, as has been reported, almost $600 million that we have been able to save. And we are going to use that surplus to pay for Tony Evers' middle-class tax cut. We know that one of the proposals he had was to raise taxes on farmers and business in order to cut taxes for middle-income families. But the best thing is we don't have to do that. We actually have this huge surplus that's been generated, and rather than allowing it to stay in Madison and be spent on growing government, we'd prefer to keep Tony Evers' campaign promise and make sure that we have an opportunity to do a middle-class tax cut. We know that the tax cut we're talking about today is going to be the same size. If you remember in the commercials, Tony Evers said we need $340 million to be able to have that middle income tax cut. That's the same number we're going to use. He also talked about the fact that he wanted an across-the-board 10% cut in middle income families, targeting those, a couple, a married filing jointly, $150,000 or less, and a single individual, $100,000 or less. So our parameters meet the exact requirements he put in his commercials. We just do it in a different way. So to talk a little bit about some of the specifics, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Terry Kotzma, who will discuss those issues.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. In Wisconsin, we have a sliding standard deduction that's based upon income. So what we're doing is we're raising that threshold, and we're raising that standard deduction to give a targeted relief to the middle class. So we're not adding another line on our already complex state tax return. We're not adding paragraphs of instructions. It's just increasing those amounts to target that amount. So with that, I'll turn it over to Representative Felskowski.
Exciting times in Wisconsin. You know, one of the things I see all the time in my district, or even as we traveled around the state and then sitting on the Joint Finance Committee, is people have expenses. Young families, kids in school, doctor's bills, sporting events, everything. And this is a way for us to work together with Governor Evers and really, really meet the needs of those middle class families. So we're very excited today to do that. The average tax cut is going to be somewhere around, for the medium family home, is going to be around $340 a year. Now, some people say, well, that, you know, if it was Nancy Pelosi, she'd say, well, that's not a lot of money, because she didn't think $1,000 was a lot of money. I think that's an awful lot of money. It makes up the difference, and it eases a burden. It allows you to do something with your kids. So very happy to be able to stand in front of you today and keep the promise of Governor Evers and also of Assembly Republicans, where we want to lower your tax burden at all times. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Representative Nygren.
Well, good morning. I'm very proud to be here and discuss how the sound budgeting practices over the last 8 years enable us to help Tony Evers, Governor Tony Evers, deliver on one of his major campaign promises. Some might ask, how will this impact the coming budget? Well, over the last eight years, we've reduced taxes on Wisconsinites by over $8 billion, and yet our revenues continue to be very strong. Currently, there is a $588 million surplus, and our most latest revenue projections estimate an additional $1.5 billion in new revenues. And at the same time, our Medicaid spending continues to decline, and that gap deficit is at its lowest level since 2001. It's down 58%, and I'm very excited to say this plan does not affect that gap deficit in any way, shape, or form. So I believe this will continue to provide tax relief for the middle class, help Governor Evers meet a campaign promise, and continue us on a very successful path while not putting other reforms of the past in jeopardy. So I'm excited to be able to support this today, and I'll turn it over to Representative Ballweg.
Good morning, everybody. So very excited to be here today with all the Assembly Republican Caucus colleagues. Actually, this same presentation is being done in many locations around the state today by other colleagues in their own neighborhoods, in their own areas, to make sure that every corner of the state has the opportunity to hear directly what this plan is and how the GOP surplus is really going to fulfill this campaign process. Now, my central Wisconsin district is very heavy into agriculture, so some of the discounts that have been talked would be very detrimental to my major industry in my district. And also several of my counties are some of the poorest in Wisconsin, so this tax cut for the middle class is going to be very impactful for my constituents, and I hope that we can move forward just as quickly as possible to make sure that this is a reality. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Speaker Voss.
So just one last interesting point that's really important for us to make. For the median income family filing jointly, as Representative Falskowski said, it'll be a little bit over $300 reduction, and those families will see a 10% reduction in their tax liability. Remember, that was from the commercial. The other thing that we think it's really important to point out is that under this proposal, Tony Evers' middle class tax cut, 75% of the tax cut benefit goes to filers that make between $30,000 and $100,000. So the overwhelming number will go to people who are truly in that middle class. So we have always fought for the middle class. It shouldn't, again, be a partisan issue. But the best part about this proposal is that sound budgeting means you can actually return the money back to the taxpayers. No one has to have a tax increase, especially on farmers and manufacturers and business people all across the state, as they are trying to make sure that they can be profitable and continue to grow our ever-expanding economy. So with that, we're happy to answer some questions and hopefully continue to show that we can have bipartisan support.
I see your memo stated the 16th. Did you discuss this with the governor during your closed caucus the other day?
We did not.
Why not?
So we wanted to talk about it amongst ourselves first, because we wanted to see what's the tone, what's the attitude. And I'm proud to say that when he came into our caucus, it was overwhelmingly positive. If you remember, we put that in the memo that we put out as our number one idea, but our members wanted to talk it through, and that's why we wanted to launch it today, so that he has the opportunity to hopefully include it in his State of the State. What a fantastic chance for him on Tuesday to say, I accept the offer of legislative Republicans to be able to use the surplus they developed for the tax cut that he wants. Seems like it's a win-win to me.
Why is it a better idea to pay for this tax cut using the surplus rather than by capping the man and ag credit the way Governor Evers?
Yeah, so as Republicans, we all ran on a pretty clear message that Wisconsin government brings in more than enough revenue from income and sales taxes to fund our general fund. That's why we look at the surplus and know that almost $600 million is there. There's two options to do that. You can either choose to give it back to the taxpayers or you can choose to spend it. Well, certainly we want to give it back to the taxpayers, and that's why there's no need to raise taxes on anybody in Wisconsin, especially those people who are in agriculture and manufacturing as they struggle to deal with, especially in agriculture, a difficult economy.
Can I answer that, Rob?
Of course, yeah.
So why jeopardize when we're at historical levels as far as unemployment? Historic levels as far as unemployment, our economy is strong. Economists throughout the state, are singing a very positive tune. Why jeopardize what has brought us to this point of prosperity by undoing a tax cut that has brought us to today?
And let's remember, that's a good point. There was a study put out by the UW that shows for the latest data that's available, 2013 to 2016, the manufacturing tax credit has created over 42,000 jobs. Well, another issue that I certainly hope would be nonpartisan is that we all want good family supporting jobs that will support the middle class that's getting targeted by this tax cut. So there's no need to raise taxes where we potentially would jeopardize the ability to create more good family supporting jobs with those kind of actions.
Governor Evers' position on pre-existing condition and saying that he would not accept what Republicans are working on, how confident are you that he will come to the table and support this particular measure, given that he's already made clear he's rejecting another what appeared to be bipartisan measure?
Well, if you remember, late last night, he sent a letter to myself and Senator Fitzgerald asking us to sit down. So hopefully the public pressure of people wanting to have an answer for pre-existing conditions that isn't just partisan wrangling where we never get to a solution. Hopefully he took that to heart, and I take him at his word. He asked us to be able to meet on Friday. I'm gone to an NCSL meeting. Senator Fitzgerald is not available, but that's what we said. We would clear our calendars today. We're more than happy to sit down, talk about it, find that bipartisan consensus, because I believe the proposal that was put together by our members in the Health Committee is a fantastic way to guarantee that pre-existing conditions are covered. Now, if there's another way to make sure that we do it, I'm open to hearing his ideas. I haven't heard any specifics, so that's why let's sit down and talk about it. But certainly,
Calendar, have you heard from him back?
I don't think so. We heard.
Not as of this morning.
Yeah,
Did you say you're taking that bill up on Tuesday, same day as State of the State?
correct.
Is that, why take it that day as opposed to another day when you don't have a competing major event happening?
So for us, we promised that on the first day we met in serious session, an AB1 would be a protection of pre-existing conditions. So I think it was important. All of us talked about that during the campaign to say that would be our major focus. Our biggest priority would be to get that bill across the finish line. So keeping our promise, bringing it up on the first day, making sure that it's enacted by our body, hopefully by the state senate, either at that day or very quickly thereafter, and get that to Governor Evers. So we're kind of focusing on the two things that I would hope show most of Wisconsin that we do want to find common ground, but it doesn't mean we have to have, only one way to do everything. So a way to do his tax cut by using the surplus, and a way to protect pre-existing conditions that's very similar to what he wants, if not pretty darn close.
Do Assembly Republicans want to do any other changes to the tax code? I mean, is this all you're looking at in terms of tax changes in this session, or would you consider this in the context of other changes?
Well, I think we're going to start with this. We're trying to focus on things that bring us together. I believe our tax code is too complex, and that it certainly is way too expensive for most families in Wisconsin. If the election had gone differently, perhaps we would have a more big, robust discussion about that. But rather than picking a fight and saying, let's look at the areas that we differ, we're looking at it and say, let's look at the areas where we are in unison. So Governor Evers proposed in millions of dollars of ads that he wanted to have a middle class tax cut that targeted a $340 million price tag, across the board cuts of as close to 10% as we can. The Fiscal Bureau and the members who are here have designed that package, and rather than raising taxes on people, we're doing it by using that surplus. So I think this is a great first start, and we'll see how serious he is. I take him at his word. I think he's serious about doing a middle class tax cut, and we are serious about using the surplus to pay for it. So I think it's a fantastic marriage of two good ideas that we have a chance to actually get into law.
So there are not any other tax changes then that Assembly Republicans want to move forward with?
But we can talk about it. I mean, we're trying to take it. We don't have the budget yet, right? So we know we can spend this because, of course, we have the surplus. That's already been certified. It's in the bank. So as we talk about other tax changes, we have to have a discussion about that.
Are you in unison with Senate Republicans on this idea?
Yeah, you can ask Senate Republicans. We have worked with them on it. They have been involved in every step of the process. I believe that they are also supportive. But why don't you check with Senator Fitzgerald and make sure that we're in concert? Because our goal is to have this passed, in the next month. So we'd have an opportunity, of course, to involve the public, listen to good ideas, and hopefully have it enacted.
You want to enact this outside the budget?
Correct. Because the surplus was generated outside the budget. That's why we want to make sure that we get it back to families as quickly as we can. Yeah.
So given that this is coming from that surplus, how confident are you that that money would continue to be available in future years to fund this tax cut?
Well, actually, as Representative Nygren pointed out, maybe you can talk about the gap.
Well, I mean, we've reduced taxes by $8 billion over the last 8 years, and yet our revenues have continued to grow, where we, in addition to this tax cut, in the most recent session, we did things such as, the $100 million for school safety. We did the sales tax holiday.
What's Wayfair? the sales tax rebate or the income tax reduction.
Child tax credit, yes. So I mean, all those things still have enabled incomes to continue, or revenues to continue to grow. So we're confident that that will continue on, even with this reduction from the middle class.
All right, thank you,
Okay,
everyone.
thank you.